Hello, listeners. This is Janine
and Kristen
from Henrico Casa. You are listening to our podcast, Vigilant Voices. Living life every day. Hello, listeners. We hope your new year is off to a great start.
And we hope you listened to our last episode titled You Can Have Influence before today. If not, pause this episode, go back and listen, and then rejoin us.
Yes, because that episode was really laying the groundwork for our chat today. A conversation with a strong vigilant voice for children in our community. She advocates at a systems level in support of policies that bolster the welfare of Virginia's children.
Right. So she definitely knows about the challenges facing children and families and is working just like we do to ensure that no child faces additional abuse, neglect, or trauma. And she's doing that work with her team at Voices for Virginia's Children.
So I want to give her the opportunity to introduce herself. So welcome, Allison Gilbreath.
We're
so glad you're here.
Yes, we're excited to have you. I know Janine has had the privilege of collaborating with you on various committees, but this is the first time that I've met you and our listeners are meeting you. So tell us about yourself.
Sure. My name is Allison Gilbreath. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Director of Policy and Programs at Voices for Virginia's Children. I've been on staff for 7 years. I started there as a policy analyst, and now I'm leading the team. And my areas of expertise are child welfare, but I most recently took on early childhood education as well.
Such important topics, and Voices really does so much good work in this field, which we'll talk about today. So, Allison, congratulations on a well-deserved position as Senior Director of Policy and Programs. And so what does that role entail, and what does that look like for you and your focus in day-to-day work?
Yeah, so I find that a big part of my role is really thinking about the strategy of how we are going to create this vision that we want for children and families. So we're a multi-issue advocacy organization. So we cover child welfare, early childhood education, mental health, health equity, and family economic security. And so my role is to figure out, okay, in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, how do we accomplish these policy goals across the spectrum? Because kids don't live in a vacuum, right? Their families are impacted by a multitude of systems. And my personal view, I'm a trained social worker, so I have an MSW.
Okay.
And so it's really important for me not just what the work is, but rather how we do the work. So I'm really keen on including the voices of those with lived expertise in the systems that we are aimed at transforming. So that's a little bit different than I think some other organizations. It does take longer, but I think it's the right thing to do. I don't think we should make change without the people who are going to be impacted.
Right. Definitely. You're bringing everyone to the table. And I know you specifically have done that in terms of the foster care network.
Yeah. So for the past few years, I have led the foster care policy network at Voices. And it's a table that we have created, we have built. We wanted people with lived expertise at the table. We wanted folks who are doing the groundwork, like you all, who are seeing the children day to day. We wanted program folks to be involved, and locals and state officials to join us at this table where we create and set the agenda for what we want to accomplish in the foster care areas that particular General Assembly session. And I think it's really important. My very first year at Voices, I went to the Capitol and I was meeting with legislators, and they were like, Allison, someone else was just here from a different organization, foster care, and they asked for something completely different. And I thought, that's interesting. So that's part of why I wanted this table to come together and said, okay, we need to collectively pick our priorities. We can't go in and everyone's asking for something different. Legislators were confused, obviously.
And they may all be good things, but together you're more likely to make it happen.
Yes, I love that. Well, and in sort of a similar capacity, you've also been instrumental in launching what we call the Youth in Action program, right? And I think this is amazing because it speaks to exactly what you talked about of bringing, a voice, right, forward with the youth. And so it's that opportunity for our young people who are passionate about advocacy to get involved as well. So tell us a little more about that program.
Yeah, and I'd love to start with sort of how the idea came to mind.
Oh, yeah.
I think, it's different.
Yes.
But I'm a Creole, so that's Black, Native American, and French. My family is mostly from the Louisiana area. And one of the things that's very common is for our ancestors to be very involved in our lives, even though they have passed.
Sure.
So I was actually really frustrated one day at the General Assembly. Frankly, I was like, I'm the only one that looks like me. This is hard.
Yeah.
And I had a dream that night, and my ancestor came to me in a dream, and she said, you need to bring young people to the General Assembly. And sort of in my dream, laid out this vision.
Wow.
And I woke up the next morning and sort of scribbled it down. And then after 2 years of trying to figure out how to fund that idea, Virginia's Youth in Action was born. And it's a amazing group of about 15 young people with lived expertise in one of the areas that Voices touches. And we train them for a couple of months. And then in January, we bring them to the General Assembly. They meet with anywhere from 20 to 25 legislators. They share their stories. They also work to inform our legislative agenda. So they tell us what we need to prioritize. Right. Last year, they said mental health needs to be your number one priority.
Right.
And so that's what we did. And that's what we're continuing to do. So it's amazing. I feel like I'm probably meeting some of our future senators, our congressional people.
What a great opportunity.
So like rejuvenated, right?
Yeah.
They give us so much energy. I think they're always thanking us, but I'm like, no. You are creating and sustaining us because it gives us hope truly to see young people involved in the political process, which in our country is so polarized.
Right.
But they are saying, focus on what we need to happen. They are the experts in their own stories, and it's just amazing to see some of them that come in that are so insecure or scared, to see them blossom. Their parents have even told us this has been life-changing.
Right,
I'm
them.
sure.
Just for their future.
Just to be listened to. Yeah. I mean, how often do we not listen to someone who's so too young?
Yeah,
exactly. And so they're like applying to colleges now and changing their focus. Or one of our young people was like, I want to do tech, and she's 16 years old, and she decided, why do I have to wait until I go to college?
Right.
So she just started learning
Good for her.
all the things, and it's launching all these amazing things. We're just like blown away.
That's awesome.
That is so cool.
I love that.
So we'll have show notes. Is there like a website, or how would someone even apply for that? Because I would love to include that.
So everything about Virginia's Youth in Action is on our website at vakids.org. We have blogs, and then the application for the next cohort will be live in August.
Okay, fantastic. We'll be sure to link to that, listener, because I know you're going to you probably know people that you want to apply.
Yes.
So awesome. Seriously, Allison, you're doing amazing work on behalf of children. I know you published a report. I think you called it a data snapshot, maybe, that was on the state of children, kind of highlighting, demographics and trends and needs. Again, I'll link to this in the show notes. But what kind of stood out to you as the key points or key challenges there?
I think one thing that was really jarring for me was to see the really sharp increase in the number of children who reported that they were anxious or depressed over a 2-week period. It was somewhere around 37%.
Wow.
And this was polled in our Virginia public high schools. So just to know that a third of students who are going to school, I mean, who remembers high school and how horrible it was?
Yeah, right. Anyway.
Around this table, I don't think any of us had the additional pressures of social media and those other things, on top of it.
And kids are also stressed out about world things right now.
Absolutely.
There's more access, and not that there shouldn't be access to these things, but they don't have a way to cope.
Yeah.
Right. And we recently had Dr. Sean Jenwright come to Richmond and do an amazing keynote, and he said, we send students to physical education not because their leg is broken, but because we want them to be well. We want them to be healthy. Where do students go in school when they're struggling with their mental health? Right? There isn't a place for them to go. That's why we're really supportive of mental health in schools pilots. We're hoping to see this General Assembly then invest more money in that, because my goal personally and our organization's goal is that every student who needs access to mental health supports can go directly to someone in their school get that support on site, whether it be in a group therapy, individual sessions. But we should not be in a place where young people, not only are they depressed, but they're willing to tell us they're depressed, and then we don't do anything about it.
They're willing to ask for help, and then the list of how to get help is too complicated for them to follow through on.
I think a lot of folks are kind of thrown because there's used to be so much stigma and shame around mental health. And that's really slowly, not even slowly, we're seeing it quickly go away, where young people are saying, no, I am depressed, but I don't know how to get help.
But it's the services part of it. And it's funny, Allison, I've always said that, so if you, let's say, cut your arm and you need significant like stitches or help, you go to the doctor. But it's a physical injury that they can see on your shoulder and gets done. And mental health is just the same thing. It's just internal.
Absolutely.
But we treat it completely differently. And it's unfortunately because it's an injury in a different capacity.
Exactly. I think it's the same way sometimes that we think about the child welfare system, right? Like we're so responsive, or we can see maybe physical abuse, right? But neglect is so much more complicated, and it's invisible, and the supports that we need are harder to get, right? Oftentimes when families are really stressed out or overwhelmed, they need financial assistance. Where is the financial assistance?
Where's that coming from?
Usually very little,
right?
But we know far more children are impacted by family economic security than they are by anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, so there's, so much here that we could talk about for hours, right? So listener, definitely, check out the report that we will link to. But Allison, I guess sort of in some ways, maybe this translates going forward. So how is the information that you all learned in this report kind of translating to some legislative priorities for Voices, for you all in this session this year?
Yeah, a lot of our priority areas are around the budget. We know that so many of the challenges that we have in our system are related to not being funded.
Sure.
So in the mental health sphere, we're going to be asking for significant dollars to support crisis intervention. I'm sure a lot of your listeners who have kiddos that have been impacted by the foster care system know that waiting 6 months to get a service for that child who has been removed and is experiencing trauma and has been struggling in their foster care placement, 6 months to a year is impossible to wait for that.
It's unacceptable too.
And then again, as we talk about this a lot, time for children is so different. So that is an eternity.
Absolutely.
It's not for adults. That's a long time, but time flies. But we have perspective. Children do not.
They do not. And then we also know that, especially in the child welfare sphere, the turnover rate for workers is somewhere around 40 to 50%.
Is it really?
Yeah. And,
it's a struggle right now.
And it's really hard. So we're asking for increases to their salaries to hopefully support their retention. But we're also asking for a training academy, right? This is like one of the only industries where you get hired and you're handed 12 cases that might be 20 kids, and you get some sort of online training and in-person training, but it is not adequate. We need an academy where they are able to be trained without any cases for maybe 6 to 9 months. They can do all of the supervision, do what we call fake family assessments where they can get supervision and told this is what you could have done or should have done. So that kids don't have to be their first case, right? We know the difference between a seasoned caseworker who knows what they're doing and often gets that child either reunified or placed much quicker than someone who's struggling to learn the job. And if half of the workforce is in their first year or 2 years on the job, that's just not a sustainable field.
No. And that complements our conversation that we had with Eric Reynolds from the Office of the Children's Ombudsman, the director, and he talked about some of what they have seen is the need for more training and more support, for our social workers. The intent and desire is there, but being newer and
you want to set them up for success.
Think about your best job. What did you have? Support, an amazing boss who encouraged you, who was available to you when you were having a hard time.
can just talk with you and process.
Felt prepared, right? Everyone wants to go to work and feel like they know what they're doing.
Correct.
Yes.
Especially when there are kids.
Like directly working with children. Yeah, without a doubt.
Yes. So for those of us who may be less familiar with the General Assembly and the process, I mean, what does it mean and what does it look like during session? And, what does your advocacy look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, the Virginia legislative session is often a little bit mystical to other folks who aren't involved on the day-to-day basis. But the legislative session is set up in committees, and so a lot of our bills will go through some similar committees like health, welfare, and institutions, or the money committees, or some other committees. But my job is to be there day in and day out as bills that are pertinent to children come up. I educate lawmakers on decisions that they should either vote for or sometimes things that should not go through.
Right.
Sometimes defensive work is just as important and time consuming. We also educate everyone that is involved in the budgetary process, and we let them know, here's the starting point, here's where we would like to be, so that they understand what is at stake for children and their families. The legislative session goes anywhere from 45 to 60 days. This year happens to be a longer session. And there are a lot of advocacy days that our organization coordinates where we bring folks with the lived expertise to speak directly to their members because they need to hear from you.
Yeah.
The constituents.
Yes, they're going to hear from a lot of paid folks, a lot of paid lobbyists who are going to make sure they're in the room. But what they're not going to hear from are families, most likely. They're not going to hear from folks who are going to be most impacted by the decisions that they make on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Yeah, I'm so glad you bring people there that just, because we wouldn't know to go, to be honest.
Well,
like, I think
feels
the average.
a little strange, right? Like most people, like, who, am I important enough? Is often a question.
Or would they want to hear
What will I do? Or,
And they do desperately. You're likely going to be the only person with your opinion to share it with them because most families can't take time off of work. And I would say even if you can't take time off of work, you can send an email.
Right.
You can call their office and just say, hey, I want you to know that I really want you to do whatever you can to support, for example, children in the foster care system or support youth mental health, whatever that is important to you.
Yeah.
No, that's great.
The more calls, the more they'll listen.
Yes. As someone who started my early career in a legislator's office, I would have to tally up the number of phone calls people called on a particular issue.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like a certain number, I had to go
like a
into
tipping
my boss's
point.
office.
Yeah.
You've had 40 people call today about this
Specifically
issue.
about this.
I need you got to say something or do
That's
something.
so good to know. The numbers truly,
It
call
matters.
everyone.
Exactly.
Call. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we're so thankful that you're, speaking up for policies and changes that benefit children and are just prioritizing the well-being of all children, especially those that we know are underserved. Our vision at CASA is for every child to have a safe, healthy home. We clearly know you wish the same, but what would you add? What's your vision for children?
My vision for children is that every child has the opportunity to be their brightest selves, regardless of their race, socioeconomic status, or the zip code that they were born in, that they have that ability and opportunity to be whomever they want to be.
Their full potential, right?
Full,
I hear you.
brightest. They
I
have
love
no
that.
barriers in
Yeah.
place.
Yeah, that's a beautiful vision, right?
Yeah.
Well, so Allison, as we wrap up here, thank you so much for your work in our community and being a vigilant voice. And so we end each episode with a call to action of some sort, something really simple that people could maybe do in their everyday life or think about. So what would you leave our listeners with?
I would encourage all of your listeners to set a goal to do one engaging activity in this Virginia General Assembly session, whether that's sending an email, sharing one of our social media posts, responding to an action alert that we put out, just one level of engagement and see how that feels and then share it with other folks.
I love
Oh,
that.
and that's so doable.
It's doable.
Yes.
And we can include the link to the site where people can find out who their delegate
Definitely.
is, where they can just search by their address and find out who to reach out and the contact information.
Yeah.
Which is great. So thank you so much for being here.
We love talking with you.
Always nice.
Your volunteers who do great work. I appreciate everything that y'all do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Vigilant Voices, Henrico Casa's podcast. We have a vision for all children to live in safe, healthy homes. You can help us make that happen. Tell a friend about our podcast and find us on social media.
I believe in the better days.